All right, I will also, okay. Yeah, so this week we're going to be talking about typography and web design, and we'll start with the design section first today, and then we'll go on to programming after with, yeah. So this week is typography, and so here on our slide, we can see we're finally exposing our web design decal font, which is Carla, and then we're also using Source Serif Pro. So yeah, just fonts to keep in mind if you feel like using them, or if you are really, if you think they're really nice. So going into announcements, homework 3 is released after lecture as usual. This week's homework is on Finstas and just creating your own Instagram user interface. So that'll be a fun homework to work on. And again, that'll be due next Tuesday at 7. And this Thursday, we're also going to be teaching Figma during lab. So we highly recommend coming to section because Figma is like a really great tool to use in the design space. And it's also super important to know for the project, which will be released next week. So yeah, make sure you come out to lab this week. As usual, give us feedback and yeah. Also, I posted a CSS cheat sheet that our TA Asia created before. And so she also made a bunch of other cheat sheets. So we'll be releasing those on Piazza as we learn more material in this class. But yeah, so far I put up an HTML one, and I also put up the CSS one. So make sure to check them out. They're super helpful because we definitely know there's a lot of content to remember as like time goes on. And so you can still obviously Google it, but it's just like good documentation to have on the side if you ever need. So yeah, those are all on Piazza. So yeah, now going into typography. So why is typography important? So typography is important because as designers, a lot of what we're trying to communicate to our users is through our text. And so when we're not able to have the reader read what we're trying to communicate, we're basically missing the entire purpose of design. So all of these here is just really illegible, hard to communicate our idea across, and basically our design is pretty much pointless. So yeah. So there's this quote that's pretty good by Matthew Cater that says, type is a beautiful group of letters, not a group of beautiful letters. And just to like break this down a little bit, it's basically saying like typography is a lot more than just like the font you kind of choose. Like it's also about like arrangement. And so it's not just like the groups of letters that we're creating, it's like how we present it also. So why, like what about typography is important on our websites? So because typography and the fonts that we choose is basically like permeating through every aspect or every facet of our website, it pretty much becomes the personality and character of our websites. So for example, I have the Slack website here. And so Slack kind of prides itself on being a very empathetic company, and they pride themselves on connecting people, making the workplace a lot more like friendly. And so they chose this very empathetic, seemingly empathetic font, serif font for their main headline, like their headlines. And so you can kind of see how that translates to make them come off as like a connecting humans type of website. You can also see that branding can showcase like a lot of different emotions through the fonts that you choose. And so here's an example of like a coffee website. It looks very quaint with the serif font. We have a little bit more of an aggressive font going on here. Yeah, and here's some like more modern one. So this is like a sans serif font, and you can kind of see how the font contributes to creating the mood that the design is trying to reflect. And so like I briefly mentioned earlier, font is, or the actual text that we have on our website is really important in how we communicate with the user. And so the fact that over 80% of information is expressed as pure text just goes to show how important text is. And so if it's not read, again, it's kind of useless. So what we factor into typography is size, weight, and color. And we'll kind of break this down more in the following slides. So going into how we make typography work. And so here we have our serif and sans serif fonts. And so if you take a look at these two like images here of the alphabet, you can see how this has a little foot right here and this one doesn't. So this one is just like straight all the way down. And so the difference between these two is that this one's a serif font and this one's a sans serif font. And so where sans in French means like without, and serif is like derived from the Dutch word for like line or like a flick of the pen or something. So yeah, so sans serif basically means it's without the line. And so some examples of this font would be like Carla, which is a font that we use for web design decal, Arial, Helvetica Neue, stuff like that. And then serif is more of the classic Times New Romans, Georgia font that you typically would write like papers in. And so the distinction between these two when we're trying to choose what font we want to use is serif fonts are more like classy and just like your traditional fonts. So a lot of the time you'll see like newspaper publications like the New York Times having a serif font. Really fancy hotels often opt for serif fonts, and just like really upscale menus also use serif, just to like give off that vibe of like a classy like atmosphere. And whereas with a sans serif font, it's a lot more modern and like technical. And so that's why a lot of the time you'll see like athletic brands opt for a sans serif font. You could probably also see like a lot of tech companies with sans serif fonts and just things that are trying to come off as more sleek and modern. Another distinction that you want to keep in mind when you're deciding between a serif and sans serif font is what the content that you're trying to have contains. So when you have a lot of text on your website, you want to make sure that it's a serif font, which is why a lot of our papers are in serif. And it just makes it more readable. So yeah, and with an image heavy website, you want to make sure that it's a sans serif font, just because the lines with the edge of the images are cleaner with the font. And of course, design is like, it really depends on a case-by-case situation. So these are all just like general rules to like guide you, but obviously take everything with a grain of salt. So with fonts, we also have to consider weights. And so weights are really important in establishing hierarchy. Last week, we talked about like visual hierarchy a little bit, and just going into this a little bit more, we want to always consider our fonts to be like blocks. And so all of our text is like contained within like a container, right? And so when we design something, we always want to keep in mind where our users' eyes are drawn to. And obviously, the bolder the font is, the more likely their eyes are going to be gravitating towards that. So that's why when we create like a block of text, we want to make sure that any headers that we have are bolded so that it's distinct from the paragraph text. We can also play around with the font size to like make it stand out more. And so yeah, you can see how there's a little bit of a hierarchy with a header, a subheader, and a paragraph text just by using the font size and the font weights. And there's nothing else on the page to like distinguish any hierarchy except for the font itself. So that's super cool with typography. And when we also, another thing with fonts, we generally use 2 to 3 fonts per website. You never want to clutter your website with too many fonts. And same thing, we'll go into color in a little bit as well, but color and fonts, we generally want to limit it to a select few so that the entire website can have a more cohesive feel. So going into like aligning type isn't an exact science, and it's aligned when it feels aligned. So what I mean by that is, if we take a look at like this, like grids are super helpful here. You can see how we can like make things feel a lot more balanced. This here we can like divide it between like a 3/4, 1/4 type of division, just to balance out the large headline here. It's really great for like a lot of physical, like designers for publications use Adobe InDesign and use the grid layout to basically like create a more balanced thing, especially when you're printing physically. You'd never want something to like bleed outside like the margins and stuff. But in terms of like designing, we also want to consider and just like how it looks. And so here's an example where like the grid doesn't work. And so you can see here the lines match up, but because our text is like not left justified, we can't really trust our boxes and our grid to align our text for us. So this is an example where we would have to like shift it over ourselves. And if we kept it like this, then the bonjour part is off from the paragraph text, and we don't want that. So always just make sure that it looks good, and yeah, just trust your own eyes sometimes when you're aligning your text. And then also for when you want to like choose your fonts, you also want to make sure that you choose a font that has um, a lot of different font weights. And so again, this kind of goes back to this slide um, where we have a lot of like to create a visual hierarchy. And so if you're not able to do this with a certain font, then it becomes a little bit more difficult. And so yeah, obviously you can still create visual hierarchy with like underlines, colors, just playing around with like font size, but it definitely helps when you're able to change the font weight. So yeah, definitely keep that into account when you start your project next week, and just choose a font that has a lot of different font weights. And you can also totally reach out to us to help find a font that works. And yeah, we also try to use some better line spacing than just like the classic like one line spacing. And so that just makes it also a little bit more readable. It creates more space between the lines, and you have a lot more breathable like body of text. And so you can kind of see the difference between these two. Because this one's a little shorter, we don't need to make it feel like this breathable here. But for a longer story, like the longer it is, the more space you want to have. Obviously, there's an upper bound on this, but typically we just want to make sure that the user doesn't feel overwhelmed by a massive block of text with like very little space between the lines. And yeah, we touched upon this last week, I think, but you also want to make sure that the width, like the characters per line, is okay too. So this is probably the minimum for the width that you want to have, and we also there's like a maximum. You can totally eyeball this as well, but just make sure it's not like one word per line or something, and that it's not like stretching across the entire page, because then that also makes your text less readable as well. So yeah, just a little bit more detail into like pairing colors, fonts, and font weights and stuff. When you have a color with a text, like with your fonts, you definitely want to create contrast between your text and the background that it's laying against. So here black works because it's against white, and that makes it definitely readable. But if we say, for example, if we had like orange or yellow against like this green, it might not be as readable just because the contrast isn't as much. We'll go into accessibility in like later weeks, I think, but yeah, it's just like not everyone is able to like see like colors on the screen like exactly how you would see it. So you definitely want to be considerate to people who aren't able to see like that same way. So yeah, white on green looks okay. And yeah, if you muted the green a little bit, then maybe you could put this dark gray on there as well. But that's just things to keep in mind. Um, Also, I think another thing I want to point out about this though is the like font weight also definitely matters when you're pairing it against a dark background. So here you can kind of see that this one looks a little uglier. It looks a little more outdated than this one. And so I think a good thing to keep in mind is whenever you have a darker background, you don't want to be using such a heavy font weight. So anything that's like regular, even regular is like on the borderline of like looking outdated. But anytime you have something like that, it's a lot easier to see when you're pairing a dark background with a like thinner font weight. So yeah, that's why this one looks kind of funky here. It looks fine here because there's less going on, so you're able to focus in on the header and just that font weight. But when you have something with a darker background, there's just too much going on for this to actually look effective and communicate without like distracting your reader. So yeah, just to like sum up all of this, just don't nerd over typefaces and pick one. Think of type as blocks to like create hierarchy. Yeah, align with your eyes. Just keep in mind like contrast and yeah, use spacing as well. So going into font choice. So this is the fun part. Honestly, this is really exciting. Yay. So there's a lot of different fonts to choose from. And so I'll show you guys Google Fonts. Google Fonts is an amazing website. All of their fonts are free, which is super cool because some fonts cost like $900 for no reason at all. So yeah, here's Google Fonts. Oh, there's a good question in chat right now about mixing serif and sans serif fonts. And so yeah, mixing serif and sans serif fonts is actually very much suggested. So sans serif works really good with headers and serif works really good with paragraphs. So a lot of the time a good good practice is using like sans serif for your header fonts and then serif for your paragraph text. And a lot of people also do sans serif and then serif and serif, but yeah, it's definitely okay. But yeah, back to Google Fonts. So this is Google Fonts. There's a lot of different fonts here, and you can also type in something so that you can see what the font looks like. So if I do like hello web design decal, then you can like see how it looks like with that. You can also sort by categories. So if we wanted to just see like serif fonts today, then we can just go ahead and browse that. And that's super cool. And then let's say I decide that I want to use, like, let's say I think, I don't know, Source Serif Pro. Amazing. Yeah, let's say I think this looks really great. Then I would like select the style and then you have that link. And you guys should have used this in your homework or your lab, I believe. So this is where you get your link for the font, and then y'all know how to add in your font into your CSS. So yeah, Google Fonts makes it super easy to integrate new fonts. So that's a good resource to use. There's also Typesample. I think they're closing down though, so I probably won't show you guys that. But yeah, there's just a lot of fonts to choose from. Here's Apple's X favorite font until they switched over to SF Pro. But yeah, everything used to be Helvetica Neue for them. And then now they're on that. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool fonts out there. There's also this extension called WhatFont. I'll demonstrate this on our web design decal website. But it's basically a Chrome extension that you guys can take a look at. And so if you click like the F here, then you can like hover over any font, and then so you can see what font that is. So that's Times New Roman. If you click it, it just gives you like a little bit more detail about it. And then if you also click like this is Lato, and then you can see font weight and all that stuff. So if you ever go on another website and you find like a really cool font that you like, then you can use WhatFont to find it and then use it on your own websites. Cool. There's also another resource called Typewolf. And so this kind of gives like all of the trending fonts. I think like a lot of fonts go in and out of style really fast. And so just using this to kind of like take a look at that is really cool. Yeah, there's like this font that's become really popular recently, just like on every like modern or like anything that's trying to seem empathetic as a brand tends to use that. But yeah, feel free to look at all of these. I think they're really cool. And yeah, just like a general like thing about typography. I gave like a lot of like tips and stuff with like fonts, and even like the question in chat about pairing sans serif and serif fonts. There are a lot of exceptions to a lot of design rules and a lot of things to communicate through type. And so you can totally like go outside the rules that are typically given, like there's so many different things to be doing with type, and there's like, yeah, it's just really cool to be able to see what everyone's able to do with typography. So yeah, don't feel free or don't feel confined to the rules of design. Like they're there for you to break. Okay, yeah. And typography is also not limited to English. So a lot of our web design decal staff is super into learning Korean for some odd reason. And so if you go to this website, which I think is very cool, I think Howie probably linked this here, but yeah, you can see like a lot of Korean fonts, and then they also do different font weights, which is super cool. So yeah, it's just nice to know that typography is not like a Eurocentric thing, which is often the case in like people's perception of design, I guess. So yeah, that's super cool. And yeah, there's also this one Instagram account that does really cool like um Asian typography. And so wow, it's so cool. Okay. But yeah, that's pretty much it with typography. Does anyone have other questions? Any questions about typography at all? Or not even about typography, or like finding fonts? I know finding fonts is a really like tedious task just because there's so many fonts out there. Cool. Okay, yeah, if there's no other questions, then we can just move on to design. I mean, not design, programming with the other slides. Okay, yeah, we'll take like a 5-minute break, or whenever Nick wants to start. Yeah, let's give it a 5-minute break.
Zany boss, suicide door, brand new bag. College girls, give a nigga head in my raps. Rockstar life, so much money, I'll make you laugh. Hey, the bitch they hate, and you can't miss what you never had. Hey, hey, off the juice, clothing got me tripping. Cut the coupe, Walker roof is missing. Ice, lemonade, my neck was tripping. Ice, lemonade, my neck was tripping.
Addy boys got some 60s in my bag. Lips sealed, ain't pillow talking on no rag. In my earlobe, got 2 carats, VVS. Got a penthouse near Rodeo, off of stress. All this money when I grew up, I had nothing. Filled with backstabbers, my whole life is disgusting. Can't believe it, gotta thank God that I'm living comfortably. Getting checks, I don't believe, but she say she done with me. Burn some bridges and I let the fire light the way. Kicking my feet up, left the PJs on a PJ. Yeah, I'm a big dog and I walk around with no leash. I got water on me, yeah, everything on Fiji.
Zany boss, suicide door, brand new bag. College girls, give a nigga head in my raps. Rockstar life, so much money, I'll make you laugh. Hey, the bitch they hate, and you can't miss what you never had. Hey, hey, off the juice, clothing got me tripping. Got the coupe, Walker roof is missing. Ice, lemonade, my neck was tripping. Ice, lemonade, my neck was tripping. A rockstar, pack up doors, tipping walls, hey. Add up raw, finit nuts, and expose, hey. I was 15, I took codeine with my dog, hey. Pretty Percocet, put methazine, I feel nauseous. Put up a stick and I hop on a plane, still in my wall, wait. Shit is so risky, I gotta be gifted, he blessed me with fortune and fame. I remember from 50, I couldn't go back empty, I knew I was stuck to the game. Loyal and I never change, I'm never gonna go against the grain. Never gonna be the one turn on my brother when police just gotta detain. I won't ever love a bitch more than my mother, and that's on my government name. I can't be no sucker, ain't hating on no one, I wish everybody get paid. Cause we can't up every day, getting hot talent in the grave. Zany boss, suicide door, brand new bag. College girls, give a nigga head in my raps. Rockstar life, so much money, I'll make you laugh. Hey, the bitch they hate, and you can't miss what you never had. Hey, hey, off the juice, clothing got me tripping. Got the coupe, Walker roof is missing. Ice, lemonade, my neck was tripping. Ice, lemonade, my neck was tripping.
The feeling you give me is home, running all through my body. Butterflies fill up the room whenever you pull up on me. Don't know what to do, got me in the mood. Take my time, play it cool, but I got a thing for you. Can't build a bond like this one overnight. Hold my hand and pull me closer when know you're mine. Look at what you do to me. You got me up on my feet. I don't do this. I'm loving what you do to me. You know how to get through to me. Let's do this. Show me something new to me. Love me like a fantasy. Never had a love like this before. So can't say goodnight. Can't lie. Sometimes I get caught up in my pride. This time, your vibe is hard for me to describe. Try to find all the words for this feeling. In my hands are the cards that you're dealing. Never had a love like this before, so can't say goodnight. Can't build a bond like this one overnight. Hold my hand and pull me closer when know you're mine. Look at what you do to me. You got me up on my feet. I don't do this. I'm loving what you do to me. You know how to get through to me. Let's do this. Show me something new to me. Love me like a fantasy. Never had a love like this before, so can't say goodnight.
You're taking them selfies and you look so fine. You don't even post them, they're just from my eyes. I give it all to you, baby, that's no lie. That's in your life, girl. Cause your well-being is more important than my well-being, girl. Can't afford to lose you. I wouldn't know what to do, girl. Not another lonely night, cause we'll be together, ride or die. Never felt a love like this before, so can't say
You can't
goodnight.
build a bond like this one overnight. Hold my
All right, well, welcome back. Hopefully that was enough of a break. But now we'll move on to the programming section. So today we're going to be discussing three main things. CSS selectors, doing a quick review over that, the box model, and an intro to layouts. I didn't include it here, but at the end, we're also going to be talking a little bit about the inspect element, which will definitely come in handy when you start working on your project. So a few HTML reminders. The head is a special part of, oh, sorry. Let me just grab the pointer. The head is a special part of the HTML. It's sort of like the title or copyright page of a book, where it's important but not something that you actually see on the interior. The body is where all your actual content goes, such as the chapters in the book, and the header is a tag that is similar to the div, but a bit more descriptive with a more meaningful name. So a few CSS reminders. We see this pop up every semester, so just wanted to review it. First of all, color refers to the text color, while background and background color change the background color. So if you're trying to change the background color, don't use color, and vice versa. You can also change fonts by using the, or well, for changing fonts, you can either do it separately like this or together, because you can put multiple styles within the same set of brackets in CSS. And be sure to put a semicolon at the end of each line. As for the hover effects, remember that there is no space between the colon and the whatever tag you use. So just a few quick reminders. You can take a look at this page a little bit later. We have a lot to cover, so I'm just going to skip these for now and head straight into the box model. So what is the box model? Well, there's a great way to look at it in this analogy of 3 picture frames here. You see that there is the content, which is the picture itself, the padding, which is the space between the picture and the outer frame, and the border, which is the frame itself. We also have between the 2 picture frames, the margin, which is the space between. And altogether that creates this, what we call the box model in HTML. This is something that you'll see on basically every website, and it'll be critical that you remember the difference between each of these elements when creating layouts. So if you take a look at this quick demo here, you can go ahead and click the link if you'd like, but I'll use the slides. So we have a couple issues with this layout. There's no spacing, there's no visual hierarchy, and of course, there's very low contrast with the purple on blue pattern. We just have plain HTML here and no CSS. But if we take a look at it, we can use the box model to make it look a lot better, where the content itself is the text. The margin is this white space between the text and the edge. We have our margin here in the light blue, as well as our padding on the outside of each of these boxes. And you can see the appropriate CSS, the corresponding CSS here on the right, where each box itself, being the content, has a width of 300 pixels and a white background color, as well as padding of 15 pixels. Remember this, this shorthand right here refers to padding on all 4 sides. So you have 15 pixels of padding on the top, right, bottom, and left. You also have 10 pixels of a 10 pixel wide border that is solid and of the color sky blue, which is what we see along the edges here, as well as padding for the larger box as well. Oh, sorry, there we go. And if we take a look at it in the inspect element, which we'll get to in a little bit, it'll look something like this, where you see the difference between the content, the padding, the border, and the margin. And again, there are 4 sides, and you see these top, right, bottom, left specifications that you can use. Now, if we're adding different padding on each side, there's 2 different ways we can do that. The first of which is using the 4 different identifiers that we see here, as well as the shorthand. So if we wanted to create this sort of effect that we see here on the right, we can add 10 pixels of padding to the top, 20 to the right, 30 to the bottom, and 40 to the left. Alternatively, we can also use the shorthand, again, top, right, bottom, left, in this sort of circular fashion, where this corresponds to the padding on top, the right, the bottom, and the left. And you can also do the same thing for margin using this, this shorthand. I see a lot of chat comments. Let me take a look. Okay, it looks like everything's been answered. And yeah, this is basically what it looks like with margins. Just the other way around, we replace padding with margin and you get a similar style. Sorry, someone is calling me. Let me put my... Sorry about that. So when it comes to units, there are a lot of units you can use. The most popular or most common one that you'll probably come across is a pixel, which is approximately an inch or well, a little less than an inch. And it's good for when you need to know the exact size of something. We also have relative units such as percents and rems and ems and all those things, which you can take a look at when you're working on the project. Oh, actually, we do talk about percent here. But percent is basically obviously a relative sizing. So you can use, for example, if we have like a div, you can add a width of 50%, which will be 50% of whatever parent it has. In this case, we have body, and it'll be like 50% of the body width. We can also we can also add a width and height to the inner, which is inside of the outer. And yeah, you can also use relative units here. And this would result in something that's 50% of the page or 50% of the outer, which is already 50% of the page because that is the highest parent we have. So inner would end up being 25% of the width and the height of 100 or 100 pixels because we have a set height here for the outer. Yeah, so we also have points as well, which you guys are probably pretty familiar with, given that most of the projects have been done, or most of the homework have been done using pixels so far. And we also have to talk about layouts, which are pretty important because layouts form the foundation of basically every website that you visit. And yeah, this is a layout, basically. There's really 4 main portions here that we see. So we want the main white content box to always be centered on top of the page, about 100 pixels from the top. And one quick question, should we set the container to a set width, like 600 pixels, or a percent, like 50%? Go ahead and, oh, sorry, it's, okay, the transition didn't work, but it should be a pixel width because something like 50%, if we narrow or use a narrow screen size, could end up being unreadable because the content right here would end up being like this narrow out of a screen width that big. So here's an example of what that would look like. We have our container with the header. There's the white background, as well as 1,000 pixels from the top, 600 width, as well as the heading and text. If we want to set a width, then we can use margin auto to center the item both vertically and horizontally. This is a trick that you'll want to remember. It does come in handy. And yeah, you can also use margin zero auto, which is a shorthand for centering things horizontally on the page. So how do we put everything together? This is a very common issue that will undoubtedly be the bane of your existence when you work on the project. So by default, a lot of elements tend to take as much width as they can, such as the div. But sometimes we don't want it to take up the full width, and we'd rather, for example, have something side by side, just like we see on the right side here. So there are a few display properties in CSS that we can use to create that effect. There's 3 different ones actually, and you can mix and match each of them within both parents and child elements to create the look and feel that you'd like. So the first one we have is display block, which is typically by default. This is the setting where everything is placed on its own line. So as we can see here, we have 3 different elements here, each of them on its own line, nothing next to each other or anything like that. We can also use padding and margin to separate the elements or add space inside of them. The second one we have is inline block, which is sort of the in-between between both display and inline, where everything by default goes on the same line, but it also respects margin and padding. So if we wanted, like, say, I don't know, 5 pixels of margin between each element, it would respect that, and it would make it look like that. We also have inline, which is sort of like inline block, except that it does not respect the padding or margin. So no matter what padding or margin you add on, it just won't show up. So remember the difference between these two, and be sure not to use the wrong one because that can be a hassle to figure out. So we also have display float, which is a little different from display block, inline, and inline block. And that float is well, actually float works with both inline block and also I believe block. I actually don't remember on that one, but basically what it does is quite literally floats all the elements to the side that you specify. So whether that be left or right. In this case, we have used inline block on the box element as well as the float left property, which moves all of these, well, not all of these, but both of these elements to the left. I'm shifting them over. If we didn't do that and these were, say, divs, well, as we can see in the previous slide, by default, it would look something like this, where everything is layered on top of one another. So how do we think about layouts? Well, take a look at this old Facebook feed here. We see that there's just a giant page with a bunch of different buttons, posts, and sidebars all over the place. So breaking it down a little bit, we see that there is the header, which contains all the navigation, and the main content, which has a set width and is centered horizontally on the page. We can also take a look at this right-hand side here, or sorry, left-hand side, that has the main content and some more navigation. We see that the column on the left, each element is like its own little, well, each element is placed one on top of the other. So there's a couple different ways you can achieve that, display block being one of them, and we'll also learn about flex positioning in a couple weeks, which should also make that helpful. Which should also be helpful in creating a layout like that. On the other side, on the right-hand column here, there's also a lot of stuff, so we'll break it down a little bit more. We see that there's two, I guess, main areas you can segregate this into. First being the cover area, I think it's called, as well as the actual feed itself. So if we think about it in terms of a layout, this can be one row as well as this bottom orange part can be the other. And as you can see, we're also nesting more columns and rows inside of this bottom row right here. And that looks like this. So if we break it down again, we can also separate it into left and right columns. The right being the feed and the left being more of like your secondary features, inviting friends, I guess, what is that, like a posts, recent photos or something like that. Whereas on the left, you have the option to create a post and do and interact with other people's Facebook posts. So together we get this sort of layout. If we were to actually draw it all together, we see the top row right here, another row in this entire orange section, two columns in the yellow sections, as well as the two blue rows within. And then you can keep going further and further down until you get down to, say, someone's name, which in itself is its own element. So now we're going to discuss something that will be pretty important for the project. Can you see my screen? Can someone like say in the chat? Let me get it open. Yes, okay. So everyone loves the Stripe website, particularly the WDD staff. So I thought I'd use that for the example here today. So let's say I built the Stripe website. It's pretty great. Would probably get 100 on our project. But you know, maybe I don't know why this font right here is gray, and maybe I want to change this font to red, but don't actually want to do it in the text editor. Well, what is inspect element actually? Where's my, okay. What is inspect element actually helpful for? Well, in large part, it's used for debugging. So if you have something that's misaligned, you can go through and take a look at the CSS and literally point at what you want to change, and it will show you what sort of like CSS is applied to that element, and it really just helps you locate where you want to make changes. So how do we open it up? So you just right click, hit inspect, and then there's a very intimidating interface here, but don't worry, I will break it up for you. So thinking about the sort of layouts that we just discussed, there's actually two sections to this inspect element tool. The first of which is the left-hand side, which contains all the HTML scripts that make this page. And then on the right, we see all the CSS here for the specific element that we have selected. So quick review, we see that we have the head of the HTML here and the body. I can collapse it, expand it, and all that good stuff. And if I wanted to say, inspect this area, this text area, all I would have to do, well, I have two options of what I can do. The first of which is going through the HTML and locating that element, hovering over it and waiting till I actually see the text highlighted itself. But that's really inefficient and I don't recommend it. So what you could do is click this little button right here and then hover over the text, click on it, and then it'll pop you directly to where that text is located within your HTML. And now that we have this selected, we see here on the right-hand side that all the CSS styles that are applied to this element are included here very conveniently. So let's say I wanted to see what the site would look like if this text were, say, I guess in the color red. So if we just come over here, we see that there's a style applied to the div called copy underscore underscore body. And inside we see the color property here. So if I were to click here on the text, I'm able to edit it. So all I have to do is type in red and enter. And you can see that it's been modified right here on the screen. Now, it's important to note that if I were to reload this page, these changes would disappear because they're not actually being saved locally onto the file. I think this is more obvious here than it might be in a project because I don't actually have the Stripe website hosted on my computer. But if you are working on your own project and it is hosted on your own laptop, it still wouldn't save either. So be sure to like make all the changes you want before you reload. And yeah, otherwise you'll lose your work. Other than that, we can also take a look at the layout itself. So we can see all the parent elements here. If we start from this body element and I want to find the parent, well, I just need to keep going up until I see, oh, wow, there we go. There's the section parent. So if I click on this, and while I'm hovering, you actually see like the little a layout here on the screen. So we have the three elements that are contained inside, as well as the margin between them. And if we scroll down here all the way to the bottom, we can see that this element itself is 540 pixels by 401 pixels, and there's no padding or margin on it. But coming back down here to the copy body element, if we look at the same thing here, we see that the content size or the element size is still listed right here. The content itself is 412 pixels by 84 pixels. And we see that there's a different padding setting here, with there being 16 pixels on the left and 112 on the right. Say I don't want as much space on the left. Well, again, just like the color, I could come back up here. I see they're using variables here, so I'm just gonna like override them. But using the shorthand, we can say add 500, oh no, more like 25 pixels to the top and bottom. And this is gonna make it look really weird, but just as a demonstration, if we wanted to add a lot of padding on both the left and right and on the left and right hand side, I could just type in 75 pixels here. As you can see, it shrunk a little because sorry, the element itself has like shrunken because it has to accommodate the padding width. Because the frame, if we think about the picture frame, is still the same size, but we have to add more white space between the actual photo and the border of the content. I think that's probably, yeah, that's basically the gist of inspect element. We were talking about fonts, so let me just reload this, and as you can see, all the changes disappear. But say we wanted to actually figure out what font Stripe is using, instead of using the convenient inspect or the plugin that Bianca suggested, I could just click here on the font. It's now selected, and we can actually filter by the property we're looking for. So if we click up, or yeah, if we click here and type in font family, we can see here that the font family is actually set to a variable called font family. So in this case, if we don't actually have a font listed right here, we can actually come up to this computed area and go a little bit further down until we get to here, which we see that the variable for font family as represents this Son var. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. I'm probably butchering it, but that's a thing. And you can see their backup fonts here as well: Helvetica, Arial, sans serif. And yeah, that's how you would locate a font that's listed in a variable. Alternatively, I could also change it again. So just to drill in this point again, if I wanted to change the font to say Times New Roman, all I have to do is actually like type it in. Okay, maybe it doesn't work here. Yeah, hold on. I think something's overriding here. I didn't try this before, so there might be something overriding. But if there wasn't anything overriding this, you would be able to change it to one of the default fonts on your computer, whether that be sans serif, serif, Times New Roman, whatever it may be. So yeah, that's a quick overview of the inspector. I know it's a lot, and it's honestly pretty intimidating when you first look at it. But this will be a very important part in debugging your code for the project, as well as some of the homeworks in the future as well. I see there's a lot of stuff in the chat. Okay, looks like everything was covered. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions. Okay, I see Hamza has a question here. So basically what I mean by inherited is that I haven't looked through the whole CSS like script for the Stripe website specifically, but there's probably a preceding a style that's taking more precedence and overriding the style that I'm setting here. So that would take a bit more digging that I don't think we can do right now. But yeah, that's probably what's going on here. How do we find the value of the variable? So we see the variable name here called font weight normal. We just come to compute it up here, and then we can actually look for it. Font weight, and we see here that it's 50. You don't have to worry about variables for CSS in this class. I don't actually think we cover it, but this is something that a lot of websites use in production. How much control do we have over the CSS? Can we only change things like font and padding? Oh no, you can change basically any style that you want in the inspector. It won't actually save again, but it will change on your screen basically. Does that make sense? So if I wanted to say, I don't know, if I wanted to change the image path, I could actually, oh wait, it looks like this is a background. That might be a little tricky. Let's see. Okay. So if I wanted to change the way this style looked here, so I'm just trying to figure out where this merge is. Okay, so let's say I wanted to center this icon horizontally. I don't want to guarantee anything here because I haven't tried this yet. But we see here that the icon class is using display block right now. But if I wanted to say, I don't know, click on margin of 0 auto, yeah, there we go. So like I discussed earlier, if I wanted to center it horizontally, I could just add on this margin property. As you can see here, it did in fact center on the page, or well, not on the page, but within its parent element. And if we wanted to like undo that, then we just get back to what we had before. And again, if you reload, it will disappear. Can we also remove blur on some? I think I know what you're insinuating. Yes, you can. There are some websites that just use CSS to blur text, which in this case, you could definitely use the inspector to like get rid of the blur. There are some sites that actually use images, so unfortunately that it wouldn't work in that case. Any other questions? All right then. So again, a reminder, homework will be released later today. I believe we will be releasing I don't know if we have yet, but we will, if we haven't already, we will be releasing a how-to guide on how to use Google Fonts and how to incorporate Google Fonts into your HTML file. But yeah, that's basically it. If there's no other questions, then we will end it off.